Steve asked, in Genesis 12 and 15, God promised that he would bless the nations through Abraham's seed. And then in Galatians 3, Paul said that Abraham's seed referred to Jesus. But how could Abraham have understood that? It seems like he thought that God was promising him a people and not Jesus.
Super question,
Yeah,
Steve.
a really good question. Can you explain this?
Well, you're obviously a careful reader of the Bible. Yeah, there are two promises that God makes to Abraham in Genesis 15. A numberless family of physical descendants, the nation of Israel, and an even more numerous family taken from all of the nations of the world. And so obviously the first promise isn't going to be fulfilled through Christ. The first promise is going to be fulfilled through Abraham's literal descendants. He's going to have many children, many offspring. But blessing is going to come to the whole world through one offspring, Jesus. And so God fulfilled the first promise of an innumerable company of physical descendants when he brought the Israelites into the land, drove out the nations, and divided the land according to the 12 tribes. And we read it in Joshua 21:45 at the end of all that. Not one word of all that God promised Abraham failed to come to pass. All came to pass. That's underscored. God fulfilled that promise when he drove out the nations and put Israel there. But then Israel was responsible to keep covenant with God by its obedience. And that's why immediately after that announcement that God had fulfilled his promise, he had done everything he promised, then Israel had to swear, all this we will do. We will keep faithful to God's commandments, and if we don't, we know he's going to kick us out of this land. So that's a conditional. The promise wasn't conditional. He fulfilled it. But their remaining in the land was conditional. But then there's that second promise that doesn't depend on the faithfulness of the many Israelites, the many physical descendants of Abraham, but on the obedience of one faithful Israelite, one faithful descendant of Abraham and Sarah, and that's Jesus Christ. So here's the difference from the first promise. First, it's a family of spiritual rather than merely physical heirs. Gentiles are included in this family as children of Abraham, and like Abraham, they're justified through faith alone. Most importantly, this promise will be fulfilled in spite of sin and rebellion because God will send a seed, singular, one person, meaning Christ, Paul says in Galatians 3:16. It's through the obedience of this one child of Abraham that families of all the nations will be blessed. So even though Israel failed to keep its covenant that it swore before God at Mount Sinai, God has kept his unconditional promise to Abraham of salvation by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. That's Paul's point, really, throughout the whole letter to the Galatians, at least chapters 2 through 4. It is not on the basis of the law that Israel swore at Mount Sinai, all this we will do, but rather on the basis of the promise where God swore, all this I will do, and fulfilled it in Jesus Christ, that we're saved.